Welcome to the deep dive. We've got some really interesting material you sent over this time.
Yeah.
It's an article by Shiva Narayan Taxshila Page, and it talks about something called a task formator.
Okay.
How this thing apparently helps create risk takers.
hmm
Uses a system called system learnography.
System learnography.
Yeah.
Right. Sounds intriguing.
It does. It sounds like a potential shakeup in how we think about education, maybe a new path to, more entrepreneurial thinking
Yeah.
or leadership.
A different kind of learning outcome.
Exactly. So our mission here, for you listening, is really to unpack this,
Yeah.
to understand this approach and how it supposedly builds those key skills, taking smart risks, thinking for yourself.
Absolutely. It's an article that definitely questions the status quo in education, proposes something quite different.
So where do we start? What is this task formator? Why should you care if you're trying to learn things faster, more deeply?
Good question. That's the core, really. The article dives right in, calls it a mathematical dimension of knowledge transfer.
Okay, mathematical dimension.
Yeah, and then gets even more specific. A high-level algorithmic construct derived from visuo-spatial learnography.
Whoa. Visuo-spatial,
Yeah.
like seeing in space.
Exactly. And it's apparently the sixth dimension of learnography. Sounds
Yeah.
complex, I know.
Yeah, a little bit. Can we, simplify that main idea? What's it really getting at?
Let's try. I think the key is this focus on structure. It's trying to bring a kind of mathematical or logical order to learning.
Okay.
So this task formator, the sixth dimension, think of it as tapping into something our brains are already really good at, processing what we see and where things are, visuals and space.
Right, like spatial reasoning.
Precisely. It uses our visual cortex, our spatial memory, to help build what the article terms structured and action-oriented brain page modules.
Brain page modules. Okay, so instead of just random facts floating around.
Exactly. Imagine organizing knowledge in your head almost like a visual blueprint, but one you can interact with. Highly structured, highly visual.
So it's less about just reading or hearing and more about actively using our brain's visual and organizing power to build these modules.
You got it. And the article definitely suggests this is a big departure from how we normally learn.
Which might be why they mentioned those aha moments, right? That feeling when it suddenly clicks visually.
Could be. It suggests a different kind of understanding. Now, to really get what the task formator does, we need to compare this whole system learnography it's part of, compare it to, well, regular school, conventional education.
Okay. And the article says conventional education tends to produce, what was it, dependent and forced learners.
Yeah, that's the claim. What do you think that means practically? Like, what does a forced learner look like?
Well, I guess it's someone learning mainly because they have to, right? For
Yeah.
the grade or to pass the test, maybe fear of failing.
Uh-huh. External pressure.
Yeah, not necessarily deep curiosity.
Mm.
And maybe relying heavily on the teacher for every step, which doesn't really set you up for situations where you need to figure things out yourself, like starting a business or leading a team.
Exactly. That's the contrast they're drawing. System learnography, using tools like the Task Formator, wants to flip that script entirely.
So the goal is focused and independent learners.
Yes. Learners equipped for critical thinking, problem solving, and importantly, risk assessment. Figuring out risks.
Okay.
The article brings up the Taxshila Model as the framework for this.
Yep.
And the aim is pretty ambitious. Nurturing entrepreneurs, investors, and leaders.
Wow. So really shifting from just taking in information passively to actively building knowledge you can use.
That's the idea, moving from passive to proactive knowledge transfer.
Okay, so back to the task formator itself. It's a high-level algorithmic template. What does that mean in practice? What does it do in this system? How does it help make these independent, risk-savvy thinkers?
Right, so think of it as the starting point for organizing information within those brain page modules we mentioned. It provides the initial structure, the framework.
Like setting up the scaffolding.
Kind of, yeah. A cognitive tool that stems from how we process things visually and spatially. So the act of visualizing the knowledge is key. It fires up the visual cortex, gives learnography its image-making capacity, as the article puts it.
So if I'm trying to understand, say, a complex math theorem, using a task formator helps me create a mental picture, see the spatial relationships between the parts.
Exactly. The article talks about these spatial dynamics being crucial for truly internalizing complex structures, not just memorizing the steps, but seeing how it all fits together in your mind's eye.
That makes sense. It's a deeper level of understanding.
And through these task formators, the idea is that students see the entire structure of knowledge. They see the Object relationships, the functional pathways, the formulated solutions, all interconnected.
Which makes learning feel more active, more personal, right? Because you're building your own mental model.
Precisely. And potentially more transferable because you grasp the underlying logic, not just isolated facts you might forget next week.
Okay, now this is where it gets really interesting for me. The article explicitly links these brain page maps and modules to understanding and managing risk.
Yeah.
How does having a visual knowledge structure help you become a better risk taker? That seems like a leap.
Well, the connection they draw is through deeper understanding. Think about it. In conventional learning, maybe you just memorize a business principle or an investment rule.
Okay?
With Learnography and Task Formators, the goal is you visualize how that principle works, what factors influence it, how they interact. You see the structure.
Ah, okay. So you understand the why behind it.
Exactly. And that more profound structural understanding allows you to better assess variables, predict potential outcomes when things are uncertain, which is basically what risk-taking involves, isn't it?
Yeah, it's about making calculated decisions in uncertainty.
Right. You're not just guessing wildly, you're making an informed judgment based on this mental model you've built and internalized visually.
That clicks. Instead of just following a recipe you don't fully understand, you know why each ingredient matters, so you could adapt if something changes.
Good analogy. And the article contrasts this active approach, building mental models, with passive learning, which it sees as more about memorization and just following external directions.
Right.
So system learnography aims for independent learners who build these models through real interaction with the knowledge modules.
And these are the focused learners they talk about.
Yes, the ones who grasp the logic behind the formula, the principles embedded in theorems, the practical implications of laws. It's that deeper layer.
And that understanding empowers them to evaluate variables, predict outcomes, and take calculated risks.
That's the claim. When faced with uncertainty, they have a better toolkit.
And the article gets specific about who this develops. Entrepreneurs, investors, leaders.
Right, people who need to make those kinds of decisions regularly.
And the key point seems to be, these aren't necessarily people born different, but people whose ability to handle risk is built through this different learning system.
Exactly. It's about the process, not just inherent traits.
Then the article brings in mathematics, says it's foundational.
It argues that the task formator, this sixth dimension, draws its strength from mathematics for dealing with real-world stuff.
Why math specifically? Why is it so central here?
Well, it highlights three things. First, math provides the structural representation, a way to model complex systems.
Okay, structure.
Second, the functional relationships, how math helps understand cause and effect, how variables interact.
Makes sense.
And third, the algorithmic formatting, the logical step-by-step thinking needed to solve problems or execute tasks.
Right. The process of mathematical thinking itself.
Exactly. The skills you develop working through a math problem, deriving a formula, proving something aren't just for math class. They build metacognitive tools.
Thinking about thinking.
Yeah. And those tools are directly applicable to real-world challenges like managing a business, investing in uncertain markets, or leading an organization through a crisis. The underlying logic and analysis are key.
Which connects to a pretty bold statement about the economy. The article suggests conventional education might lead to an overproduction of job seekers and the underdevelopment of job creators.
It's a strong claim, yeah. But the logic follows their argument. If you mainly train people to follow rules and fit into existing structures...
You get more people looking for existing jobs.
Right, than people creating new structures, new jobs, system learnography. By aiming to build these independent, strategic, risk-comfortable thinkers...
Hope to rebalance that.
Yeah.
Create more job creators.
That seems to be the goal, cultivating leaders who can innovate, adapt, and create opportunities, leading to a more dynamic economy. Less dependence, more creation.
So shifting the focus from just execution to also include opportunity identification, innovation, and taking the risks to make things happen.
Pretty much. And it brings us back to that core contrast. Forced learners versus focused learners.
Can you summarize that distinction one more time?
Sure. Forced learners are pushed by external things, grades, requirements. Learning is reactive. Focused learners, supposedly nurtured by this Taxshila model, are pulled by internal drive, curiosity, goals. Learning is proactive, structured, purposeful.
Got it. Driven from within versus driven from outside.
And the article adds another layer, mentioning how integrating motor science, spatial memory, and visual reasoning helps develop these brain pages, enhancing action, recall, and creativity. It's a holistic view.
Okay, so let's try and wrap this up. The core takeaway seems to be the Task Formator is presented as this key tool rooted in math and visual spatial thinking within a broader system called system learnography.
Right, and its main purpose is to develop learners who are independent thinkers, comfortable with assessing and taking calculated risks.
The kind of people likely to become entrepreneurs, investors, leaders.
That's the hypothesis laid out in the article. And the potential wider impact, as suggested, is significant shifting education's output, maybe addressing economic imbalances between job seekers and job creators.
It's a lot to think about, which leads to a question for you listening. Given this idea of learning visually, structuring knowledge spatially, this Task Formator concept, how might you apply some of these principles?
Yeah, maybe not the whole system, but are there elements here structuring information visually, focusing on the underlying logic that could help in your own learning, your own field?
Could it help you engage more proactively, maybe gain a deeper understanding?
And perhaps think about your own learning style. Do you feel more like a forced learner sometimes or a focused one? Are there small things you could do to boost that internal motivation, that curiosity?
Definitely food for thought. If this deep dive got you curious, perhaps look into visuo-spatial learning techniques generally, or maybe even dig deeper into this specific Taxshila model mentioned in the article.
Worth exploring if it sparked something.
Thanks for joining us on The Deep Dive.